Exposition, an LMC Experience original podcast. Hey, welcome back to the Exposition podcast. I'm your host, Micah Simone Bouvier Sims, and I'm here with my co-host, Drew Booth.
What up? Hi, guys. This is Drew. I wanted to let you know that my favorite color is rainbow, and I really want coffee right now.
And today we have a very special guest today. Professor Star Steers. Welcome to the show, Star.
Yippee! Welcome.
Nice. Hello. Thank you for asking me. And I'm going to just say you can also find me under the name Star Lewis Steers. Either one's fine.
Excellent. Good information for our students to know.
Star Lewis
Steers.
Yeah.
So isn't it like the animal steers?
Oh, well, when people are having trouble spelling it because they think I said spears.
As in Brittany.
As in Brittany, yes.
Oh, man.
I say, no, not like Brittany, like a herd of cattle.
Like a herd of cattle.
Steers.
Steers.
Yes.
That works.
Yeah, it does. But I added the Lewis back in a couple of years ago, and I'm trying to make it happen. We'll see. I'm still working on it.
I'll call you Professor Star so I don't have to.
Oh, I love that.
Don't have to worry about
I'm
it.
sorry. I'm not that as respectful as her. I'm just going to call you Star. I'm sorry.
That's great. Whatever works.
So we have one. We wanted to ask you about your journey in academia real quick, and just like as like a just a quick starter.
Yeah, how did it all begin?
How did it all begin?
Oh my gosh.
Take us back.
This is a wild question. How far back do you want? You want like high school? You want community college?
I want
What do you
all
want?
of it.
How
Oh my gosh.
when did you decide you wanted to be a teacher, and how did that journey start for you, and what has been the struggles along the way?
Wow. Okay. I feel like you gave me a reasonable place to start, but I'm gonna do what I usually do, which is make it unreasonable.
Yes,
And
amazing.
circle back because honestly, like I decided I didn't want to be a teacher.
Really?
That was how my academic journey started. So in high school, I was a performing arts person. I was in my school's show choir. So if you've ever seen Glee, that
Oh,
was
yes.
what
You were
I
a
used to
Gleek?
do. Yes, I was a Gleek
Amazing.
for sure. I'm an alto. I was in blue sequins, like the best days of my high school life. I also was in like the Victorian carolers, which was fantastic and, is probably the reason why I'm such a costume freak today, but that's a story for another day probably.
Obsessed with that.
And I was in drama, and so I thought performance was going to be my life. So I originally applied everywhere as a music major.
Really?
Yes. So I got into UCLA, got into San Francisco State, CSU Fullerton, and then a couple of other schools as well. I mentioned those three because those were really the top three that I was considering. And I was going to go in as a music major. But what started to happen, after I graduated and as I started trying to figure out like what going to college looked like for me, I realized, okay, maybe here I feel like I'm pretty good. I'm a good singer. I'm a good dancer. Like maybe I could end up on Broadway. But the reality is most music majors end up teaching.
Really?
And I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't think I had the right personality for it. I couldn't imagine, because to me it sounded like doing the same thing every day, going to the same place, doing the same thing. And so I thought, that's just not adventurous enough for me. I want to do something different. So I thought, it'd be amazing, like working for the CIA. So I'm going to go ahead and major, right? I know. I'm going to go ahead and major in international relations.
What?
Yeah.
I love this story
What?
so much.
So the other thing that happened in that same summer where I was realizing, wow, I'm a big fish in a little pond, and I should probably not be a music major. Probably not going to end up on Broadway, is I also was realizing I actually don't know how to go to college, which sounds really weird, but I am a first-generation college student. So I'm the first person in my family to have a four-year degree at all. And in my immediate family, my mom had gone to the community college where we lived. We lived in Reading. So I went to she had gone to Shasta College, and I made a slip and said I went with her. Sometimes we did go with her because there were four of us. There were four kids in my household, and often we, got dragged along wherever my mom was going because she was a single mom. So I did hang out at Shasta College a lot, both as a kid and then later when I went there as a student. But anyway, so I decided, I probably don't need to go to UCLA. I probably don't need to go to San Francisco State. I probably don't need to go to Fullerton. What I probably need to do is go to community college. And instead of just being sensible, because like I said earlier, I like to make things inconvenient and complicated.
Oh, yeah.
I instead decided, you know what would be really cool? How about I go get to know my dad that I've never really lived with since I was 6 years old? That'd be fun. So that summer after I graduated high school, moved up to Oregon to Seaside, got a job as a server at a restaurant, started dating a surfer because I think that's
A surfer?
That's like on the checklist of things you
yeah.
have to do when you move to a coastal town and you're a
What?
teenage girl in the U.S. Yeah. So I did that.
God, put that on my bucket list.
Right.
Man.
And then I started at the community college up there in Astoria. So Clatsop Community College was where I started going and majoring in international relations. And I stayed there a couple of years, ended up moving back to Reading, ended up at Shasta College, where I kept working on my international relations stuff, just doing my general ed. And then ultimately, I went to San Francisco State. I transferred in as an international relations major.
Really?
Yeah. That was a lot. Sorry, guys. So that's
And
where
there's more.
There's
there is
more?
more. Yeah, that's where our story sits. So, I'm just going to go ahead and put this out there. Like many people who are raised and socialized as young women in the United States do, I, as a young person, often tied like my decisions to whomever I was dating at the time. Such a, I'm not going to say they were bad choices because they all, accumulated to get me here. But like that is a thing that people do, right? Young people do. And there were many times when like stability, whether that be financial stability or housing stability, surpassed the importance I placed on my own education, right? So that was definitely a trend in my early 20s, was following whoever I was dating wherever they were going, or like adjusting my life path for what they wanted. And so when I transferred from Shasta College into San Francisco State, this was one of the first times that it was the opposite. The person I was dating at the time actually followed me to San Francisco. And
That's how it should be.
right? I mean, I feel like the give and take is important, right? But I hadn't had that up to that point. And so I actually loved it in San Francisco. I would move back there today if I could.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, they were just...
What's wrong with SF?
SF sucks.
Oh, Micah, that's a hot take. We should talk about that.
You're wrong. Sorry.
But there are things about San Francisco that I love. Obviously, there are things I would, if I had a magic wand, I would change. But it was a place where I really found my home, my academic home, my intellectual home. And spoiler alert, like I don't teach international relations, right?
No.
I teach communication studies.
Yeah.
Because what happened to me at San Francisco State was, and I should back up and say that I, all along the way, kept taking these communication classes. I didn't know why. A couple of them I had to take like as part of general ed or whatever. Like you guys know how that is. There are a few comm classes in there. So I took them, but then I loved them and I kept taking them even once I didn't have to. So by the time I got to San Francisco State, I had accumulated a lot of lower division comm classes. And so I was sitting there in my international relations class one day, and I just, the professor, his name was Dr. I just lost his name. Hauser, thank you, was talking about, he was telling us about the San Jose Mercury News' investigation of how the CIA was deeply involved in the entry of crack into Black neighborhoods. And I just was sitting there with my mouth agape and just this feeling in my stomach of horror that I was preparing myself for a job in this agency that had taken part in this. And it wasn't like I didn't know the reputation that the CIA had. It wasn't like I didn't know what our government did around the world and inside of our own borders. But it was a moment where I thought, wow, I actually don't want to do that. I don't want to go work for the CIA. What do I really want to do? And it just so happened at the same time I was taking two other courses. I was taking, it's called a junior seminar course where we just got to do lots of beautiful like literary analysis and poetry analysis. And then I also was taking a class called The Rhetoric of Social Progress. Yeah. And it basically was about how music and how public messages shaped America as we know it today, like how rhetoric was part of our social movement.
Really?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a fascinating class. And So I was thinking, all right, I have to change my major. I cannot continue with international relations. I know this is not the path I want my life to take. But there was this class that was just like blowing up my mind at the same time, this rhetoric of social process class. And then I was doing all this wonderful literary analysis. And I thought, you know what I really love? I really love literary analysis, and I really love rhetorical analysis. So I marched over to the building where Comm Studies is housed at San Francisco State, and I wandered in and found the comm office, and there's a wonderful woman working there. Her name was Donna Smith. I think she has finally gotten to retire, but I asked her, yeah, right. I'm like, who's your department chair? I need to talk to someone here. And so she put me in touch with the department chair, and I just said, can you please help me? I think maybe communication studies is where I belong. Can you help me? And so her name was Carolyn Cheney. She sat and looked at my transcripts with me, which were kind of a disaster because I'd already been in college for 4 years at that point. I'd gone to 2 different community colleges. No, I'm sorry, 3, because I'd also done some classes at San Francisco City College by then. And she said, no, look, your path is here. This is obvious. You've been a comm major all along. You just didn't know it. So here I am, like, halfway through my junior year, transfer student, I changed to comm. And the next year and a half of my academic life was just a delight, an absolute delight. And by the time I was done with that, I realized, you know what I want to do? I want to be a high school teacher. But because being a comm studies teacher isn't a thing in high schools in California, what you become is an English teacher.
How fun.
Right? But I wasn't content just being an English teacher. I wanted to be able to look at not just the literature and the language, but look at it in context, in its socio-historical context. And so I decided to, I got my comm degree. It was back then called speech communication. And then I got my English teaching credential and my social science teaching credential.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, both here. So I can teach both those subjects at the high school level. So that was a really long-winded way of telling you like how I got to comm studies. And then ultimately, like students who've had me have heard this story, but I did end up getting my master's eventually as well. I went and taught high school, had a whole career as a high school teacher, and then at some point realized, no, I gotta go do this other thing. I need to teach college. I need to teach comm studies at college.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, that's so long, guys.
No,
a long story.
That was a really
It's a very winding
It's a
path.
very
I
interesting.
find myself relating to a lot of what you just said, more specifically because there's always, personally, I've had many, many moments where I have to look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, what are you doing? And you have to kind of reshift and refocus your entire plan. And that's a scary thing to do, especially after you've already set yourself for this one thing. And then, especially for a major, and that late into your college experience. And then you were just like, no, I just have to do this. And that I think there's a lot of courage in that.
I think one of the things we also don't surface enough is like it also feels shameful. It feels like you made a mistake. Like I messed up somehow. I chose the wrong major. I wasted time. I wasted money. I wasted effort. Like I did something wrong, and it feels shameful to change your major. And
Absolutely.
like I feel this real tension inside of myself when I think about what we're trying to do for students now, especially community college students. Like with things like guided pathways, I'm there for it. I know there are so many students who would have totally benefited from like picking a path, staying on that path, getting great support, and following all the way through.
Yeah.
I was not one of those students. And so I really struggle, like personally and professionally, with what it looks like when we get a world where we set students on a path and try to keep them only on that one.
Absolutely.
It's hard. I'm very torn. I'm torn about this for my own children as well. Because I know that if I didn't get to wander around, I wouldn't have ended up where I was supposed to be. But I'm so grateful that I had people who, when I humbled myself and went and said, I don't understand, I'm confused, can you help me like figure out, will this work? They sat down with me. And I really hope everyone trying to make their way through college without like family influence, without a really clear path, can just internalize this message that it's not failure, it's not shameful to not know what you want.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What's failure is if you don't go and talk to people, you don't go and ask questions. And I just think we really expect people to be so self-assured and to have such a clear path ahead of them. And that's really not the case for a lot of people.
I definitely understand that. As far as the like asking for help. I'm also a first generation college student, so even when I was going to apply for colleges, my mom just kind of looked at me and shrugged her shoulders. She was like, I don't know, you're on your own, kid. And so a lot of that was trial and error. A lot of it is still trial and error because I still don't really know because I'm applying for UCs right now. And a lot of that, like, I just kind of have to figure out by myself, which is scary. But the whole asking for help thing and making sure you know your resources and getting out there, which is also hard. Like, that's so difficult when you don't know what you're doing. But yeah, I think it's very important to do all of those things as a student and just as a person.
No, for sure. I mean, I think I kind of relate to it as well. I mean, it's a bit different because I feel definitely constrained from, like, you know, especially because you said you're following around with your partners everywhere. It feels constraining, and I feel that way with another relationship in my life, which is my parents, right? I feel like it's just kind of like, you know, I'm supposed to do this and this and this and this and this, but I don't want to do this and this and that. You know what I mean? I want to have my own way. You know what I mean? But it's like, it's very interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's something that's, you guys have both said things that sparked thoughts. I'll have to decide which trail to go down. But, like, in some ways, the total lack of parental guidance and the lack of parental pressure was a gift, right?
Yeah.
Like, 100%.
Because my mom didn't have an expectation. There was no expectation on me except that I think getting married and, like, having a family was an expectation. It was a cultural and religious expectation. And just being nice, like being a good person, being of service to other people was really her only expectation for me. She wanted me to work hard, be nice, and take care of people. And so I think I'm here. I'm doing it, right? Like, the job I do every day is I'm trying to be of service to people. Sorry. I'm trying to make my brain work with my mouth. But yeah, so I think I did it. I achieved what she wanted me to do, but there were definitely times when I, you know, wished for some parental pressure in some direction other than, like, just be a good person.
Oh, yeah. I didn't, as far as my mom, she definitely, it was like, you go to college, you have to go to college. There was no choice there. Even when I was even debating it, it was never really an option for me. I just had to go. And I do feel grateful for that. And also, I guess it's sort of like the grass is greener type of thing. You're always like, well, then what if you had did this? Then I would have maybe done a different thing. But yeah, I do appreciate her desire to get me into college because really it's been such an amazing experience for me. She didn't care what I majored in. She didn't care if I completed it. She just cared that I went to college. You have to go. I don't care. You have to go. And I'm glad that I'm here, and I will finish.
That's awesome. That's so great. I think what's funny is even now, I'm a student now.
Please
circle
talk
back
about
to
that
in a second.
Wow,
but
yeah.
I know when I went back to get my master's, which, I mean, really my origin story. LMC is my origin story. So I was sitting in a classroom at the old campus the old Brentwood Center, I should say.
That pile of junk.
Right? That old store, the remodeled store.
Yeah.
And I was a high school teacher. I was a full-time high school teacher. I was very pregnant with my first child.
Gosh.
And I was taking a couple of different classes. I was taking a cultural anthropology class, and I was taking a U.S. history prior to 1865 class. And then I was taking classes at Las Positas as well, like a California water rights class, which sounds so boring.
That sounds boring.
But, like, it is actually the most interesting and geeky stuff. Like, the history of water rights of California, like, teaches you so much about how our state operates. But anyway, so I was taking a bunch of classes to keep myself entertained, and to, you know, just keep my credentials fresh because I was, you know, wanting to make sure I was a good high school history teacher. And I was taking this class, the U.S. history class, with a professor named Charlie Bohackle, and
It's a silly name.
he was the coolest human ever. Like, you just looked at him, and he oozed love for his job. It was so infectious. He would just every class be so excited to be there. He was a wonderful teacher. I just felt like he was fantastic. And while the content for me was mostly review, like I already knew all this, I had taken this before, I really loved his teaching style, and I was able to engage and really get a lot from his course. And I just remember thinking, he loves his job so much. I wonder how he got his job. And so I looked on the syllabus and I'm like, okay, he doesn't say doctor or anything. I don't think he has a PhD. And then he told us one day, he said, what you have to do my job is a master's degree. So I have a master's degree. If you want to teach at community college, you could get one too. And it was another one of those light bulb moments where I was sitting in a classroom and realized, I could do this. All I have to do is go get a master's degree. But I was busy. I was within weeks of having my first child. Actually, my son was born October 15th. So midterms, right?
Gosh,
His birthday's this coming weekend. So I didn't miss the midterm. I managed to, show up in time to take my midterm and I passed. But a year and a half later, very pregnant again with my second son, went and took the graduate record exam, the GRE, because I had decided to apply to San Francisco State. I wanted to go get my master's. So I went back to San Francisco State. Yeah, so I had 2 babies. When I started, I had a 5-month-old and a 22-month-old. And I started my master's degree, which is
impossible.
Kind of bonkers if you think about it, right?
Superwoman, for real.
It was wild. And I messed up a lot. I let people down. I had to take time away from my family sometimes in ways that were uncomfortable. But, I got it done. It took me 3 years to get my master's in comm studies. And it was the best thing. It was absolutely the best decision. And so I got my degree. I graduated. I should have shown you guys. I have my master's thesis in there. I keep it in my little thing over
You do?
here. Yeah, I have a copy in here.
So you chose the thesis as...
Yeah, I did. I wrote a thesis. Here's my...
Did you have the choice between the thesis and the comprehensive?
Yeah, I did, yeah. So in my department, we could either write a thesis. We actually had 3 choices. We could write a thesis, which I chose to do. It's a very long thesis. It did not need to be this long. So the title of my thesis, don't laugh at me, is A Guide to the Girlfriends, a materialist feminist analysis of advice for mothers. And
that's amazing. Can I read?
Wild. Yeah, you could totally peek at it. It's an analysis of a series of advice manuals for mothers because that's what I was in the middle of. I had these 2 babies and I was holding a marriage together and I was the default parent. And so all of the things I was writing about and learning theory about, the ways that that women do emotional labor and labor, practical labor inside the house, household labor, and even sexual labor inside of their marriages. And I just knew, oh my gosh, this is something I never want to stop thinking about. So I did have to set that aside, though. I graduated. I didn't have time to think about theory. I actually had to go back to teaching high school for 3 or 4 more years, I guess. And then eventually got to come back to the Bay Area and had 2 more kids.
Nice.
Yeah, and so it was when my 4th son was, I think, 7 months old that I started teaching LMC.
Yeah. When was that?
See, this is my 10th year. So, and he was born in December 2012. So it would have been August 2013.
2013.
Yeah.
Damn, I was literally 7 years old then.
The first class I taught here was mass communication, journalism 100.
Really?
So, yeah. So thanks to Cindy McGrath.
We love Cindy.
Cindy is the homie.
It's Cindy's fault you're here stuck talking to me today.
I mean, she is the reason for this podcast. So
it's full credit to Cindy. So she took a chance on me. She was like, "Oh, I think you can do this." So that was how I got my toe in the door at LMC.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome.
I love that. Speaking of LMC, I wanted to touch upon some of the hardships that you've faced working here since it has been a decade. I'm sure there's been some bumps in the road. I'm going to be asking all the professors what it's like being a professor at LMC.
Wow.
As someone who wants to be a professor in the future, I'm just asking for a look into what it's going to look like.
I love this question, and it also terrifies me. So I told one of my friends I was doing this today, and they joked with me, they're all, just don't get canceled. So I'm having my just don't get canceled moment. No, but I want to say, to preface everything I say, I am so fortunate to be full-time tenured professor. Mm-hmm. So few people get this opportunity at the community college level. Here at LMC, there are only 2 full-timers in my department, me and Marie Archidiacono Kaufman. And so we're a tiny department. We have the most amazing adjuncts. So our part-time professors keep us afloat, because we teach a bread and butter class for LMC, which is the Speech 110, the speech communication course that you guys have either taken or
currently taking.
Yeah. So our course is extremely important to the college. And it's one of the golden four, right? Like, obviously the Cal Getsy requirements are changing, but like speech comm is always going to be crucial to getting people transferred other places and to getting people degrees here at LMC. And so I want to, again, like, reinforce that I'm so incredibly fortunate to have my job. I worked hard for it. And also it's a lot of privilege. Privilege allowed me to be here, and even being here is a huge privilege. I mean that word in every sense. Every sense we can say privilege, I want to own that. So one of the things I would say about being a professor is it's often really hard to sort out your feelings around, like, what support looks like and what support you need and what support you would ask for in a perfect world. So I'll just take my department for example. Like I said, we teach a really important class for the college, and like, obviously everybody's classes are important, right? But those GE classes, really, we have to have them. We need to have lots available in lots of different formats. And so there are moments when it feels so frustrating to be like, why do we only have 2 part-timers, right? Like, we teach a really important class. Can't we get a third?
Yeah.
Like, if we had a third, we could, maybe, do more campus events. We could branch out a little bit more, offer more sections. And so it's very hard not to take that personally, right? I know it's just the numbers. And I know that, every year when the administration looks at which departments to hire for, they take all sorts of factors into account. They take into account, like, the number of students that need that course, like how many different degrees that course applies in. Like, I know there are tons of factors. And it still is hard to have your department not be the one that gets the hire, right? So the last couple of years, we were like, oh, so close. We were the next one. And then this year, we're 2 slots below the bottom.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so it's like, oh, man, we really, really need this. And so there are moments where it feels, like I said, it feels very personal and it feels arbitrary, even though it's not arbitrary. Like,
It's not
I know
arbitrary.
logically it's not arbitrary, but it feels that way. And what becomes frustrating is so many of us have these huge dreams. Like, I have huge dreams for my department. There are so many awesome events. Like, I think I just threw it away the other day because it was breaking my heart to look at it. But I had a Post-it stuck on my monitor of, like, events I would like to hold. And there are so many cool things I want to do. But the reality is, even if my personal life and my own life as a student wasn't so pressing, like, just my duties as a professor, as an instructor, make it really hard to engage in other ways and do other things. So that I think is the other thing I would say. And this is not just a function of being at LMC, but I think of being in academia as a teacher anywhere. You have these huge dreams, you have these big ideas. There are so many things you want to teach and do, and wonderful ways you want to engage. And for me, I really want to be cross-curricular and work with people from other departments.
Yeah.
Like, I have so many friends in other departments, and there are 1,000 projects I want to go do with them. But the reality is, when I come back to my office after class, I don't have the luxury of, putting together some awesome event with one of my buddies in another department.
Yeah.
I need to reply to 15 Canvas messages.
Yep.
I need to, fill out some paperwork that was probably due last week. I need to figure out with someone else in my department, like, how we're going to assess our student learning objectives for this course. And so I think there's this thing that happens where really idealistic people with all these dreams,
I mean,
right, start to feel a little crushed by just the daily grind. And so when I hear you say, Drew, like, that you would love to do this, yes, I will never, and I think I've said this to you before, I would never tell you not to do it. I'd say, come join me. But in the joining, in the inviting other people to come into academia, which is what I think one of the coolest parts of my job is, getting to talk to young people who are interested in doing this job. Like, please come do this job. And also know that you have to give yourself grace, because some semesters you're going to have time for your big, beautiful idea and for your cool projects, and other semesters you're not. And so I think that just that push and pull it's a lot to manage sometimes. Right? I love my job. I'm so blessed, and there are so many other things I would like to do with it. So I just have to keep myself in check sometimes. Like, you know what? I'll go. Sit on the Barbie panel. I'll go help out where I can. I'll go volunteer for this. I'll come do this podcast. Right?
Yeah.
And then there are so many more things I would like to do. So if and when speech gets to expand, I love the idea of doing so many more cool events and good stuff. Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question.
Oh,
that does answer it. At least, you have two future professors right here. So, I actually had two questions for you possibly. One is actually just kind of a petty question for Drew.
Micah.
I just had to ask you, what is autumn music to you? Because I was looking at someone's autumn playlist recently, and I was like, this is not autumn music.
We're arguing right now.
Oh, this is interesting.
What is fall music?
Okay.
Because you're such a fall person.
Why can't it be different for everyone?
No. Her personality is literally autumn, okay?
That's funny. I am
autumn.
a little, which is funny because I would like to say, I would have asserted that I was a spring person, but now that you say that, I'm lying. I think I am a fall person. Which, man, I'm going to have to really examine some things in my life now. But all of that said, I think for me, autumn music, you guys are you're going to think this is such a wishy-washy answer. Okay. So I am not good at getting my homework done. All right?
I couldn't tell. No, I was joking.
Yeah.
I'm just joking.
Not good at getting my homework done. I am great at researching. I'm fabulous at reading the things I researched, and I'm good at making connections and writing outlines. But when it comes to sitting down and actually writing the thing, it's very hard for me. So I am always reading blog posts and asking other academics, how do you do it? How do you make yourself sit down and churn out your work? And so I received a piece of advice from a PhD candidate that I was in a fellowship with over the summer. And what she said was that she chooses a different album for every major project.
Really?
And yeah, right? This is wild to me. And when she sits down to work on that project, she only puts on that album, right? And it doesn't matter if she's brainstorming or doing research or actually trying to write. If she's doing something that she can tolerate listening to music, she will listen to that album while she does it. And I was like, oh, this is brilliant. Because I really do listen to music while I work to kind of turn down the other voices in my head. I listen while I work, but it never occurred to me to do it in a structured way. So that's why there are two answers to this. So in general, my fall music is probably the same melodic deep house that I listen to the rest of the year.
Okay.
But this fall, and I have wide-ranging music tastes, but really, if I just need comfort and peace, that's what I'm turning on. I'm turning on something deep housey. And this fall, though, my music is going to be a bunch of different albums. So I'm working on a project right now for my sexual, reproductive, and gender rights class.
Ooh.
I'm doing a whole bunch of policy analysis, so it's reading laws and figuring out. It's a whole thing. I love it. I won't geek out on that. But so for that particular final paper and the term I'm working on right now, I chose Taylor Swift's Midnight's album.
Oh, of course.
Midnight's is
forgot.
mid, though.
Yeah.
Come on.
I mean, and we could argue about that later, but
We
it's
will.
actually
And we will.
it's okay for it to be mid, right? It's just supposed to be background noise that doesn't make me suffer while my mind is engaged elsewhere.
Okay.
So it's like a form of Pavlov's bell, right?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Right? It's not like Pavlov's harp. It just is like a tool to get my brain and my body ready to work on that particular thing. So I'm open to suggestions for my global sexualities course.
Easy.
My final paper has to be, I just have to choose one of the many ways that gender and sexual orientation play out outside of the U.S. And
that's going to
research
be
that.
interesting.
I haven't settled on my final topic yet.
I have actually a recommendation for you on that one.
Beautiful. Okay, what do you got, Micah?
So Marichita by Silvana Estrada.
Okay, I'm going to write this
Marichita.
down. Okay.
Marichita, M-A-R.
They are.
Chita. Marichita.
Okay.
It's Spanish, so it's
Last name is
fantastic.
Estrada. All right, that might be just the vibe. Okay, I'll give it a listen.
Yeah.
So
There you
that
go.
was a very long-winded answer to the question. But yeah, my fall music this semester is whatever helps me get my homework done.
I
most
love that
efficiently.
answer.
Yeah.
That's a
I should
W
probably
answer.
take a note.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
But like, I also, as much as that feels a little vulnerable to tell you, I think it's really important for you guys and for everybody to know, for all students to know, like, being an academic is pretty brutal. Like,
Yeah.
there are so many moments where I want to just quit my PhD program. I tried to quit last semester. I tried to quit like 3 times. I told everyone in my life, "That's it, I'm quitting. I don't even know why I'm doing this to myself. I don't need to do this." I told my coworkers, like, "You guys, I have to be done. I can't do this. I don't need to do this," because it felt so horrible.
Good to know.
Not to be doing
Looking
the
forward to
learning. The learning is beautiful, but the way I was trying to force myself to produce was causing me suffering, right? And so I often tell students, like, you are not your product. I'm very good about telling other people this, like, you are not what you produce. You are not what you produce. You are not reducible to the product that you put in the world. But I wasn't listening to that for myself. And I just was stressing so much over, wanting to be the perfect student that I was just torturing myself. When what I needed to do was really focus on the process, not the product. And it sounds so trite, but it was so true. So, yeah. So I'll be honest, like, homework is not easy for me, even though if I won the lottery, I would just spend every penny going to school the rest of my life.
Really?
I would take every class. Well, I'd obviously, like, help people in need as well. And I don't play the lottery. For the record, I don't play the lottery, so I'm never going to win. But, like, yeah, I love being a student, but that product piece, my ego, not my ego even, but like just my self-worth was very tied up in having a perfect product.
I find myself relating to that so
Yeah, a little too
severely.
much.
It's so loud right
Bruh.
now.
Be nice to yourself. Stop it. You're not a product. You are a person. And yeah.
You know what's so funny? Is so funny about that is I was working on my I think I'm working on my narrative speech for your class right now.
That's a good
And
one.
I was just like, man, I want to quit this class. This class is terrible. I
Don't
need to
quit.
stop. I'm like,
It's hard, right?
I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I don't know, but you kind of have to do it, I guess, right?
You do. And Micah, I think what I would tell you, first of all, don't quit. You guys, if you're ever tempted to quit a class, go talk to your instructor. Go talk to them and look them in the eye and say, I feel like I need to quit this class. Help me decide.
Help.
And I mean, who knows what is going to come back, but I think just even saying that out loud, like, dude, I want to quit. Can you help me figure out what the right move is? I mean, that's the only way to start figuring out the right move. But please don't quit my class.
That seems so
can't.
passive aggressive.
You literally can't.
No. Well, you inadvertently, you're saying, you just told me I want to quit, and now it's my job to convince you not to quit my class.
Yeah.
Can we tell them, like, you don't have to tell them what your story is, but the prompt, the narrative speech that Micah is, like, struggling on right now.
It's like what makes you feel powerful, right?
Yeah. And what's interesting is I love that that's what you pulled, that the topic is actually about power. Think of a time where either you felt powerful or maybe you felt powerless, or maybe you saw someone else receiving power or being stripped of power, or a time you came into your own power or helped someone else come into their power or empowered someone. So the kernel, the, like, heart of the topic is power.
Yeah.
Right? And all the different ways it operates. And it's a hard thing to think about.
Yeah.
Because it's very vulnerable to think about and then have to talk about a time when you saw power and the way it operates. Because even think of what power is. Sometimes power is good. Sometimes people use it for good. And then sometimes power constrains us and prevents us from being fully human or, living our life in the way we want. So it is a lot. I know it's a hard assignment. I'm sorry, not sorry.
You don't need to be sorry. You don't need to be sorry at all. It's just something I have to do. It's like all that matters.
Do you remember on a couple podcasts ago when I was saying that you have to roll the ball up the hill and then watch it roll down and then do it again? I feel I came to that conclusion because of school. And I've had a very much toxic relationship with school, like sort of like the ex-boyfriend I just can't throw off my back. It's just like he's so bad to me. But honestly, though, it was really just my perception of school that ruined my relationship with it. Once I realized, especially with college, once I realized that I get to go here, I get to have an education.
Mm-hmm.
It is a privilege for me to be here, and I get to go through the, like, some girls don't get to be educated, which is what I said whenever we were talking about that. I mean, there are so many things that I get to have in my life, and when I focused on learning instead of getting an A, which I don't even want to talk about grading because that's a whole
Ungrading.
Ungrading, which is a practice that I really love that you do. It's got to be a lot of work for a teacher who operates on that sort of system, but I really do appreciate it as a student who got to choose their own grade based off of the work that I felt that I put into it, because a lot of teachers don't even take into account your personal experiences with the class or your outside life, or they don't take into account anything other than what you produced. And like you said earlier, you are not what you produce, you're not your production, and a lot of teachers don't see it that way. And I like that you do see it that way, and that you do take into your students' lives into account.
I'm going to try not to get teary talking about this, but like the reason, and I know I've shared this with both of you, I try to share this with my students as honestly as I can. The reason that I decided to go and learn about ungrading, and there are a couple of professors at LMC, Scott Orff and Stacy Miller, who did this and were running like professional development week trainings on it. And I kept going to them and thinking, this is a thing I need to do. And the reason I was driven to it, it was not out of it wasn't even out of feeling inspired. It was out of feeling so much shame. I knew I was failing students, and I was failing specific students. Like, it was easy for me to look at my rosters and say, like, I'm failing young Black men. What's happening in my teaching? Like, in what ways am I being rigid and unyielding that are failing folks? And so I was sincerely desperate to figure out how to make this class that really is so hard for people. Like, public speaking is not easy.
Yes,
It is not easy. And it's very emotionally difficult, and it's stressful. And I just kept turning the question over in my head, like, what in my teaching is making this already difficult thing even more difficult? And how are my rules, how are my things that I'm valuing as important hurting people? And I know that I was inadvertently hurting students with rigidity, with systems that allowed people just to stack up enough points to scrape by, even though they didn't have all the skills, right? And so I'm sorry, this is a little convoluted, but I really came to ungrading with my heart kind of broken, right? We were coming out of COVID. I had just gotten tenure. I had been, I always am in a process of reflecting on and refining my teaching practice and all of my materials and assignments. So I was doing those things right, but I just kept thinking, like, people are leaving my class not actually having demonstrated everything I need them to have demonstrated. And then some people are not ever leaving. They're dropping out. They're not showing up to give their final speeches. And I just could not figure out what was going on. And so I started messing with things. I kind of tiptoed my way into ungrading. And it, honestly, I'm a year and a half in now. It's the best thing I've ever done. And it's also the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
So when I grade speeches now, I'm not just like circling, oh, okay, their eye contact was kind of iffy. I think I'll circle a 6. No, I'm having to write a note that says, the first 2 minutes, you really were looking down to read a lot. I saw that you settled in by minute 4, though, and that's awesome. How can we get you more independent from your notes so that you can look up at us all the time? So it's much more labor intensive, giving that qualitative feedback. And I'm having to, try to cleverly design rubrics that allow me to do a little less of that qualitative work. Maybe I just have it on the page and I highlight it. But the work it is actually feels important. I'm not just a data entry monkey. I'm not just sitting there like, putting in numbers, right? Like, okay, your eye contact was a 6 versus your eye contact was a 10. And so I should say, I'm not at all trying to dismiss, or I'm not trying to disparage my colleagues who rely on a number-based system. I'm not trying to say that quantitative means of achieving grades are not okay. For me and the way I run my classroom, the way I was using approaches that claimed to be quantitative, the way I was using numbers, it was not measuring learning appropriately. It wasn't capturing students' actual skill set, and it just was creating unnecessary work and harm. So, yeah, I appreciate hearing that, Drew. You saying that you liked being able to assign your own grade, and I think it's kind of funny because that's what we say it is. Like, oh yeah, Drew assigned her own grade. Here's what Drew actually did. Drew busted her butt all semester, gave probably 8 by the end. So we have like 3 major speeches and a bunch of smaller speeches. I feel like, can I bust you out? I think you had 1 revision, right? No, Drew had no revisions. Okay. So tons of my students end up with revisions. It's actually the most common thing that happens to people. And all a revision says is like, hey, you're not quite there yet. There was this one little component in your speech. Oh yeah, what am I thinking? You didn't get a revision. Sorry, I'm like sitting here cataloging Drew's speeches in my head now. But like all a revision is like your opportunity to actually go back and pick up the skill, like demonstrate the skill that the student learning objective says you need to leave here with. So I love that ungrading lets me help students make sure they get what they're paying for in the class, make sure they leave with the skills they should have. And so at the end of the semester, like, yeah, you have all my feedback, but then Drew had to sit down and like write a reflection paper saying like, look, I did this, I have this evidence of my work. I gave this speech, I received this peer feedback, I learned this concept, I think I'm going to use it in this area of my life. Like, I set this goal at the start of the semester, this is what I had achieved by the end. And given all of this evidence I'm telling you of my learning, I think my grade is this. And it's a powerful thing to have students like actually own their grades in that way. And I know you might be thinking like, oh, don't some people just say, of course I deserve an A? Yeah, some people do. Like, people got to shoot their shot. Like, fine, all right. Don't hate the player, hate the game, right? So what happens in that moment is I come back to the student and I say, hey, I read your final reflection paper, and here's the thing. Looking at what I saw and looking back at your evaluations, I don't really feel that this grade is supported, but let's talk about this. And then a conversation opens up. And most of the time, a student who proposes a grade and I challenge their proposed grade, most of the time in our conversation, they're able to be honest with themselves and say like, look, looking at the CSLOs, I use the like National Communication Association Competent Speaker rubric, which is problematic in some ways. And, I try to work around that and through it and with it. But like by the end, the student is able to own their grade and have some genuine self-reflection. And I think it's a good process.
It's a great process.
It's exhausting though. It's tiring for everybody.
I think to me, I've talked to Ed Haven a little bit about this as well. I think professors that do that kind of work that allow students to make mistakes and then correct those mistakes are exhausted. Those professors are doing so much, like an insurmountable amount of work. And I am scared for it, but I know that if I did become a professor, that would be the work that I would have to dedicate myself to because I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. You're too nice of a professor, Fona.
How do you learn, though? I mean, there's so many studies that prove that you can't learn without making. I mean, you can learn, but you learn better whenever you make mistakes. Whenever you learn that this method doesn't work, but this one does. And having like a do-over, especially to me, is so important because the whole point of learning is to not get it right the first time. I'm not going to get it right the first time because I'm learning right now. And I think the whole point of like having exams and having homework and speeches and stuff like that, like to me, I would want the chance to see my mistakes and do it over again, because just making those mistakes and knowing that I got them wrong doesn't help me. The only thing that would help me is knowing how to get it right the next time.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important way to teach. And I saw that in your classroom, and I saw that in Professor Haven's classroom, and I took something from that. And I'm so grateful to have been in your class and in his class, because now I know that that is a practice that I will take with me later. And if I hadn't seen that, I think it would have been different. And I imagine that a lot of professors are also going through that same, like, there's the same creative learning process where you don't really know what's going to work for all students, or for most students. And I think that must be really scary, I think.
It is, and I think also we kind of have to call into the room like COVID.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like we keep talking about how COVID changed us, and it sounds very trite, but it's true, right? It changed the way we gather or don't gather in community, right? It changed the way we access knowledge, the way we access each other, right? Like, it changed many things. And so as students are coming back into the classroom, because this is still happening, right? Like my classes are full this semester for the first time in years. And I was like one of the first back on campus, like full time, all the time, teaching all my classes fully face-to-face. I was the first person in my department to be like fully back face-to-face, because I wanted to see firsthand like what was happening, like in what ways I was going to have to shift things. So that's actually, one of the reasons I started to experiment with ungrading. Okay, so let's see. I'm trying to think where I was going with this. Yeah, but like, so one of the reasons I felt like the time was right to play with ungrading and transition into it a little bit was I did see that the students were different. I include myself in that as well. We, in some ways, You're good. Were you locked out, Micah? I'm sorry. I just felt like coming back from COVID was a great time to experiment with ungrading, because the ways we had all changed were still emerging. And one of the harms I saw, both for my students and for my own kids, right? I have college-age kids at home as well, and for myself as a student, was that in the Zoom world, because of the way we were turning in our work, because of the way we were receiving our work, things had become a little more impersonal. It was a little easier, right?
True.
Yeah, just to like click a box on a rubric, put in some numbers. And so it's been a real labor of love to think about, how can I rehumanize this thing that I personally had dehumanized, teaching speech online. Like that was wild, right? And there are people who do it very well. A couple of my colleagues are amazing online teachers. I have had, as a student, amazing online teachers.
Not me, at least.
I have.
Yeah, there are some good ones, right? And but I was not. I was dehumanizing my students, and I had made myself into an automaton in a lot of ways. And so part of moving into ungrading was like restoring my own humanity, and then finding a way to help students find their humanity in my subject. So I know that sounds really cheesy, but it's
no, not at all.
It's very, very
true.
earnest, and I think it involves a lot of talking, a lot of thinking, because it's weird for students too. Like, think of how stressed you were the first time you heard that I wasn't going to be giving you numbers. Like, wait, my speech isn't a 70? Is it a 90? Like, what is it? Can you just tell me? Yeah. I still, I had someone ask me yesterday, so if you had to say what letter grade my speech was it like a C? Was it like a B? I'm like, I'm not going to tell you that. Let's look at the speaker rubric together. How do you think you did?
I so genuinely wish, I feel like, this might be a little a nuanced topic, but I feel like if more teachers had taken that style of teaching and applied it, I just think our entire focus of school would be so different. I think there would be a lot more people in college. I think there would be so many more students and teachers and college educated people in the world, because that is an encouraging style of teaching.
Yeah.
That is something that students are like, okay, you know what, I did this, and it's not about the grading per se. I mean, it is at the end, but it's really just how you feel that you've done. It's really about the education about it. It's really about how you learn. And a lot of classes aren't like that. It's just about what grade you get at the end.
I definitely agree with. Oh, sorry for cutting you
go
off.
ahead.
But I guess what I've at least like how I've been rationalizing it, because I thought about possibly doing ungrading when I go and like finish my master's program, right? Is that like if I'm gonna go teach something like, for instance, symbolic logic or math or science, there's always a right or wrong answer.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, you can't really use like words like I can't say that you fulfilled what you have, but you don't have a grade. I don't know. It seems like when you do with numbers or with STEM especially, I don't know how you do that with. And I thought you might have some insights, Star.
Oh my gosh, I feel like there are people in our STEM departments who are doing this kind of stuff. Like Brianna McCarthy does a beautiful job with like authentic assessment, which is not the same thing as ungrading, but authentic assessment is a thing that often shows up in the classrooms of people who do ungrading. And like, so this is a way of like allowing students to demonstrate their knowledge in a way that feels more natural. It isn't just like multiple choice. I'm sorry. I didn't think this question through. I never thought we were going to be talking about this. I would have prepared better. But like, I think I hear you, Micah. And because I don't teach those subjects where there's like a hard and fast number, it's not like a math problem. I'm going to do the problem and get the correct answer. And so I can reasonably assign a number value to that correct answer. Because my field isn't like that, it's very hard to do a good job answering that question. But I guess what I would say is, if you think about what ungrading is trying to do, right? What's it trying to do? It's trying to change the power hierarchy. Back to this issue of power. It's trying to change the balance of power. It's trying to change the hierarchy between the professor and the student, between the teacher and the student.
Yeah.
And it's trying to, instead of letting the student feel like they are just going to have one chance, right? And obviously I know there are test retakes and things. Instead of the student feeling like the professor is the person from whom the knowledge and the grade flows, right? Yeah. It's trying to flip that and tell the student, like, no, you're the captain of the ship, to use a kind of a stale metaphor, right? But like your grade is, you're the one earning the grade, right? You're the one creating the grade.
Yeah.
You're also the one creating this experience in this classroom. So while like I'm designing your environment, I'm in theory creating an experience, you're the one who has to live out the experience. And the way you live out the experience, like the factors in your life that are impacting you, the ways you choose to engage with the material, like all of those things matter also. And so think about where your power lies. So it's inviting the students into the power in a way that I think can also totally happen in fields where you do have hard numbers. There are clear right and wrong answers, right? Yeah. So fields where like a qualitative assessment isn't the right thing. Okay? So I think as long as instructors are being conscious of their power and where the power lies, and trying to like hand a little bit of it over to students, even if ungrading as like a practice doesn't work for them, there are still ways to destabilize harmful power relations that exist in colleges, right? And so many people here at LMC are doing that.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, it doesn't have to just be under the umbrella of ungrading. People are handing students power, sharing. It's not even handing, right? Because like
sharing.
that treats power as something that only I can hold and I can give to you. It's like inviting them in. Hey, look, here's this thing we all have to do. We all have to survive the semester somehow. I, got to put some grades in 16 weeks, and you, I hope, want some credits, right?
Maybe.
So how can we all survive this together? And, there are lots of different ways to do that. But I think that, to me, is the heart of ungrading, is inviting students in to this thing we're doing together, acknowledging that, like, I do have institutional power, but then also getting to feel like the joy of handing some of that away, right? Like, maybe that's just my personality. Like, I don't want to be the keeper of the grade book. Like, that terrifies me. I want to be the keeper of, like, hey, look, here's a cool way we can do narrative speeches. So I don't know. I geeked out on that for too long.
No, you didn't.
No, not at all.
I hope it answered the question
You did.
of why I do it and why I think it's valuable. And yeah, I feel so fortunate to be at LMC. We have amazing teachers here.
Wholeheartedly agree with that statement.
Amazing instructors. And so
All right. Just joking.
yeah. What I think is cool is, like, people are down for super neat, nerdy conversations, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I shared with you a lot of our jobs is like, our jobs are like the day-to-day, the administrative stuff, like making sure that everybody is doing what they got to do, like helping everybody. But also, like, one of the coolest things for me about being back in person on campus is getting to bump into my colleagues in the hall and having these super nerdy conversations. It's great. And so when I say, like, oh, I love my colleagues, I enjoy so much getting to bump into them and hear the cool things that they geek out about.
Awesome.
That's good. I like looking forward to that.
It's actually, we hit the hour mark. How about that?
So proud of you for that.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So we
editing.
should probably start
We should probably
wrapping
shut
that up.
Yeah. I should shut up.
No, we don't edit this. This is all unedited,
No,
always.
no,
It's called Exposition.
It's called
baby.
Exposition.
Oh, my heck.
That's what Head Haven taught me with his expositions he would assign me. Anyways, we're going to start wrapping this up. We have to give a few shout outs real quick. First off, we want to shout out the Star for letting us use her office as a
Thank you
recording
very
studio.
much.
Oh, I'm so happy. So we're in my little Brentwood office, and it's beautiful. None of my wildlife creatures showed up, but outside my window, sometimes there's like a little jackrabbit.
Really?
Yeah, and then I have some really
Gosh.
cool birds too. So sometimes I just sit in here Cinderella style and like look at my animals, but they don't sew anything for me. I sew for myself.
I would like to thank Drew again for coming out of her way to go drive to the Brentwood campus.
Thanks to you too, Micah.
And
Dual effort.
it was not really a dual effort because I was like,
You're
I don't
here,
know.
I'm here. I feel like that's two peas in a pod now.
I mean, you are my co-host. We're co-hosts, so I guess
You're
that
welcome
is-
for fulfilling the basic duties of our contract together. Oh my god.
Anyways, we always give our guests any amount of time, however long you want to talk about whatever the heck you want to, whatever
love
you
this
want.
part.
Oh, you guys. This is a terrible thing to do to me.
But I love it.
I love it.
It's my favorite. This is our favorite section.
It's the only thing consistent about this podcast.
Wow. All right. So you would think I could just do this really easily, but the problem is I have too many fun things I would want to talk about. So I'm going to try to keep it tight. It's hilarious. I listened to your interviews with a lot of my colleagues, my buddies, and I noticed that you like asked them the definition of whatever, a lot of them of whatever they teach, right? And I was dreading that question because like the definition of communication is kind of like
It's in the
not-
title.
It's in the title, right? But
I think
it's
it's a little
also
vague.
it is a little vague, right? It's a little esoteric because like I mean
Yeah.
there are lots of detailed definitions I could give you from all the many textbooks I've used over the years. But at its heart, like communication is the exchange of meaning, right?
Yeah.
And I think like we should get Ed Haven in here to talk about meaning, right? Because like
Oh,
even
yeah.
that
It's the meaning of
term,
life.
right? The meaning of life. Even that term, I'm not going to say it's contested, but it kind of is, right? Like meaning is an abstract thing, right? And so this notion that in communication we can imagine that we're going to come to some shared meaning is kind of wild, right? And I always joke with my students, I'm like, you guys know you're wizards, right?
Oh, I love
You're
that.
magical. Wizards, warlocks, which is like whatever term you choose to indicate that you are a magical human. Like you are magical because just the fact that we can kind of basically understand other people when they talk is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So just what we do, we use our mouths or our hands to string together either sounds or letters that we think mean one thing, and then we find some way to transmit them to someone else, and then imagine that they're going to reassemble and understand them the same way we do. Like, that is bonkers.
Yeah.
And that we all pretty much do it okay most of the day, right? Like,
Right.
sometimes there are weird miscommunications that happen. And, sometimes we add on not just words, but we add on facial expressions or eye contact or like smells or use of space or use of clothing. Like, we manipulate all these many things in order to send messages to each other and to create meaning. It's just, it kind of blows my mind. And I think if my students knew like what a nerd I actually am for my field, it would be too embarrassing for them. Like, they wouldn't want to look at me if they knew how much I want to burst in tears every time I joke like, you guys know this is magic that we do this, that we communicate, that we try to make shared meaning, because it really is. It's incredible. And then I just think about like all the little branches of comm studies, right? Like, we could look at media communication, mass comm, right?
Yeah.
Fascinating to analyze like these media messages we package up and give to each other. And we could look at organizational communication and family communication and health communication and just all these different ways that and these different contexts in which we create shared meaning. And so there are days when I just sit there and think, I can't possibly read all the things, learn all the things, teach the students all the things, but I love that all day long I get to think about and teach about and talk about trying to achieve shared meaning. Like, that really is kind of the coolest thing in the world to think about.
Awesome.
Also, possibly the scariest thing in the world. It's terrifying as well, because I just know that every little corner of life is a search for meaning, right? We think about like trying to figure out who am I? Like, what do I mean? What's my worth in the world? What am I supposed to do? Like, that, right? That's heavy. That's a communicative process.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, we as humans, like you guys are students, you know this, like, we are created in communication. We are created in communication. Who you are, who Micah is, who Drew is, was communicated to you. Like, some person named you.
I named me,
when you
actually.
entered the world, right? Yeah, like, and that's powerful. And people started telling you things about you, right? Like, you're a girl or you're a boy, right? Or you're smart or you're fast or you're pretty. So people tell us things about ourselves that accumulate to start building our identities, right? And then at some point we get to start talking back, and we might say things like, well, actually, just because I'm a girl, that doesn't mean I'm quiet, right? Or maybe I'm not a girl. Maybe I'm neither girl nor boy. Or like, maybe I'm not smart. Or what does it mean to be smart? So we start pushing back on these things, these meanings that other people have applied to us. I just think that it's so magical to think about how communication creates our identity. Relationships, right? What does our relationship mean? Are we a situationship, right?
Ooh.
Like, ooh, all right. Oh, are you my partner?
RJ?
Yeah, are you my partner? Are you my boyfriend? Are you my girlfriend? Are you my spouse? What are you?
Some big questions.
What is this? Are we just talking? Are we hooking up? Like, the fact that we have so many different labels for all these different situations we find ourselves in points at how crucial that meaning making is in doing all the things that make us human, deciding who we are in relation to other people, deciding what's important, what our values are, and what the world should be. So I know I'm posting cringe. Sorry.
You're posting cringe?
Yeah.
No, you're not. No,
But
it's thank
true.
you.
Thank you.
Come on,
Thank
Star.
you for letting me carry on. But yeah, I'm very excited to have been able to talk with you. Sorry. Thank you for letting me ramble.
Of
I started
course.
apologizing.
We love
Thank
your
you.
rambling.
We love your
All
rambling.
right,
Come on.
it was so much fun to talk with you too.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to first off, I want to also shout out one more shout out. I want to shout out all the moms. I love my mom. We have a very
Moms.
wonderful mom here as well.
Oh,
She feels like a mom in the classroom too.
it's kind of weird. I didn't know I would like turn into the mom in every corner of my life, but somehow I did. So I'm cool with it. I like to bring that nurturing energy.
Very
so.
comforting energy.
Shout
Yeah.
out to the moms.
I try.
We love moms here.
Yes, we do.
We love moms. Anyways, we're gonna end it here. I'm gonna say, I'm. Oh wait, I've learned in your class that you're not supposed to say we're gonna end it here.
Yeah,
So
you can say thank you for.
thank you for listening to the podcast. It's really bad because I have this is actually my teacher and she taught us all this stuff. It's
See you
kind of
next
bad.
time.
See you.
Have a philosophical debate. Have a nice coffee and go outside because it's so beautiful.
It is
Have a-
really wonderful.
Have a meaningful day.
Have a meaningful day.
Touch grass.
Oh my God.
All right. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.